Welcome back. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studio. And in studio is a guest that I was reflecting how that first connection happened between us. And this is like years ago. It's hard to say years ago, but years ago.
Yeah.
But on this episode, she comes from via reaching out to info@detroitisdifferent.com. So the goal with this is always to get all these nuanced stories that create the culture of Detroit all together. Hence, I would strongly suggest, from a background in marketing and having so much of that information, if you really want to like grow an audience and everything, I think you need to stick to one lane. What I'm doing with Detroit is Different is a different like archival project now, where it really grabs at the culture. And if you sit and you listen to enough of these interviews over the span, you definitely get a whole lot of me talking all day. But more so than me talking, you get the tapestry of the people that make the name and the title. Detroit is different because the people are different here and the experiences that come together. So in studio, the woman that I have, and we're shooting this on Mother's Day, so she even said this is a great day because of the message that will be delivered. And this is, I would say, it's no way that this has not impacted someone in your family, right? So you all should already kind of know what I'm talking about. And the journey from and how and with, we're going to unpack a lot, but we always start with the classic stories of the Detroit story. So y'all got that long preface and that long introduction. Phenomenal woman, been in leadership and great energy. And then to find out a vocalist as well. So she projected in voice. Lisa Whitmore Davis, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. I'm really excited to be here too.
I love it. I love it that people that are checking it out and everything. And then like I jogged you up on like our first interaction.
Yeah.
Years back. Through the AKAs.
Yes. Alpha Kappa Alpha.
See, and me more so, I know it through, I'm people.
Yeah.
My Frida. Love my Frida.
Hey, Frida Sampson.
Love my Frida Sampson. And I remember Frida walked over and she said, Car. And if anybody knows Frida, she's a connector. She's like, all right, now, you need to meet her. And I didn't have all my, talk about the growth in business. I didn't have like my ducks in a row to even make a pitch to the organization that you were stepping in leadership to. But she made the introduction and it's like, I may be able to make some things happen. Just, made it. Mm-hmm. And the energy, it was so warm and everybody else in the room kind of knew you. And I mean, that's a room that you want to know some people because the Detroit AKA chapter, I can definitely say, without question, has opened many doors for Kari Frazier, which means it's opened doors for Detroit is Different, which is carried over for community and my people.
Yeah. I had a funny story. When I was a little girl, my mother loved to go see Dr. Sampson preach.
Wow.
And I would always be sleepy.
Hilarious.
And he preached early in the morning, and she says, I'm going to spank you if you make me late to go see Dr. Friend Sampson. And I'd be like, I'm going to get up. And then one day to then move here and then be in sisterhood with Frida Sampson. I mean, her dad was like a great man in my family, and we lived on the west side of the state. But my mother knew the power and the message that he was giving. And she was like, don't you make me late to go see Dr. Sampson. So I told Frida that when I first met her. I know she was like, oh my God.
I know. Fred G.
Yes.
One of the people that, when I bring Frida back, we're going to talk a lot more about that. But also one of the coolest interviews that we have in the archives of Detroit is Different is that run when I'm interviewing Frida the first time years back. But
nice. Very nice.
Things have changed. Let's put it like that. Just how people move and the relationship between church and community. But Fred G set a standard that is still spoke about as if yesterday.
Right.
Tabernacle was just as intricate and involved and entrenched in community.
I feel he taught the body of faith that our work, of course, is inside of church, but our real work is outside of church. And his impact in young people and people who are facing challenge in their life, that the church is supposed to make creative ways to serve that. And then, to be honest, not to get into, I just left church, but that models Jesus' work, because Jesus wasn't always in the temple. He was out amongst the people.
And that right there, for me knowing all my pastor friends, and we have those conversations, and then you get in those shadows when you think about Jeramogi and the Shrine of the Black Madonna.
Yep.
You think of Fred G. Sampson. You think of the work and the lens of how, especially Black Detroit, looks at what the role of a church in community is from the 70s, 80s, 90s to today. It's just changed a lot.
It has.
It's just changed a whole lot, from not just the message, but also that relationship to community. And it's different. It's different.
And community is important. Community has always been the center of the work that I do professionally. Living in my house as a little girl, my mother was a nurse. My father was a teacher. My dad went to Monrovia, Liberia in 1976 before the first coup in Monrovia to be a missionary. He taught vocational ed and woodshop in Benton Harbor area schools. He went over there to the Bendu mission to teach the men how to do basic construction, and they built a dormitory over there.
Wow.
My mother she held the first American Red Cross blood drive in a Black church in the late 60s. My mother was also the first Black chairman of the American Cancer Society for Marion County. Vera was a volunteer. Herb was a volunteer. And if you lived in their house, which I did, you were going to serve in some kind of a way. Either you're going to get voluntold, or you're going to find your own way of vein of volunteerism. And I think that string has, throughout my life, and then especially during this experience that I wanted to talk to you about, even though they are gone, my mother died when she was 64 years old in 1997. My father died in 2019, both from cancer. But my father, even though he was in the nursing home and he was a tripod, because he wasn't a quadriplegic fully, because he had the use of one hand, so I guess he called himself a tripod, but he was still volunteering, tutoring the nurses and the nurses' aide in algebra, because his mind was still sharp.
Wow.
He was doing trigonometry worksheets until the last 3 weeks of his life.
Well, he's taken on tasks that many adults would never have taken on ever.
Right. And just to kind of close that loop, I was at the nursing home about, I think that was it was late. It was in 23. I saw one of his CNAs. She said, "You're Mr. Whitmore's daughter." I said, "I am." She says, "I'm a nurse now. Mr. Whitmore used to help me with my algebra homework. I passed my algebra exam. I was able to continue my education. And now I'm a nurse. I'm not a CNA, but he used to help me. I lost it."
Wow. That's deep.
I lost it.
And you drove right into like some of the introductory questions. It always starts with, what's your roots and ties to Detroit, but coming from Benton Harbor. In Benton Harbor, we often look at Detroit as it is Michigan, especially Detroiters. You know what I'm saying? It's like New York, look at New York. But Michigan's a huge state. Yeah. We often don't think of it like that because we're kind of in our pockets, but being the truck driver I was, I can tell you, it's a lot of nooks and crannies in Michigan.
Yeah.
Benton Harbor is one of those nooks and crannies that has a lot of Black folk. And the community and the layers of it, when you get on that west side of the state, where we're at, and just the ways that different types of industry, because it's a different industry out that way, have had relationships with the Black community. It's created some of the same challenges Detroit has and some different challenges. As my time working with the Michigan Citizen, all the time reading so much about Reverend Pickney and getting a chance to meet him and meeting a lot of the activists that work with them. And this is years ago, but having an understanding that it's like, okay, Benton Harbor's community, this is functioning differently. What was Benton Harbor for you like growing up, and what do you remember as you talked about working in community, but what do you remember just about the place in the community itself?
Benton Harbor was and still is, but when I was growing up, it was a safe space for young Black professionals
Mm.
came into the area, like my dad and many of his friends. They came in '67. They were looking for Black teachers. So, of course, a lot of my parents' friends were, educators. They came from HBCUs, and they brought and from down south, from out east. But they brought a lot of that tradition and community. And Benton Harbor was, my mother would always say, we're the only Whitmores in the book. And our yellow pages and white pages combined were about that thick. So it was a very small community, one high school, maybe 3 down to 2 junior highs, and then maybe 3 or 4 elementary schools. So you got to know everybody. If you didn't know them, your siblings knew them. Or for me, my mom being a nurse, she worked at the hospital. We only had one hospital. So either my mother ran into them through the hospital or my dad met them through teaching, and he was also a coach for tennis, football, track, basketball, and he was also a referee. So, and I was his ball girl, and I was his clipboard girl. So,
What do you think it was about Benton Harbor that attracted your parents to say, okay, let's go on and move up that way and settle?
well, they were in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom worked at Cook County Hospital. My dad taught at a vocational high school. And my brother and sister, who are significantly older than me, my brother was really having a difficult time because he was being bullied. They didn't probably call it that back then, but when I think about what I heard his
He was
experience with,
experiencing.
he was being bullied, and he was a brilliant young man. My brother got accepted to West Point. He graduated from Michigan State with honors. He was really, really smart. So my parents were looking for somewhere to go. And then this job opportunity came from my dad. He moved to Benton Harbor first, and my mother and my grandmother and the kids, we all came probably about within 6 to 7 months. But they were looking for a space that not only, because if it's my dad landed in Benton Harbor '67, we think about what was going on in the world. They were living in Chicago when Dr. King was assassinated, and then the riots, the disturbances, as really is the preferred way to characterize it. But they were looking for opportunity. My mother just finished nursing school, so they were trying to find where do we go with our young our little family. We have 2 girls and a boy, and so my dad took the opportunity, and I guess he maybe tested out the waters. I wish I could ask him why they did the staggered move, but that's how they did it.
Wow. And also from Chicago, that's the other thing about the west side of the state. A lot of people on the west side of the state are definitely connected or traveling to, or here we go.
Baby, I'm about to show you my Marshall Fields bag in honor of my mama, because you go to Chicago, nothing. I had never heard of Hudson until I got to Michigan State. I was like, do they have a Fields?
Hilarious, or even worse. During the 80s, they came in the late 80s wearing these red and black jerseys instead of the blue and red. I'm just nuts. That's where the Chicago Detroit starts.
That was
Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, that was our big city. That's my big city experience. I talked to my friends who grew up here. They're like, oh, we used to go to Hudson's and see all the beautiful exhibits. We had that same experience, but in Chicago. On Wabash, and seeing all the Marshall Fields, Carson Peary Scott, all the different exhibits. And as you can tell, my mother liked to shop.
Okay. All right. So from that to Detroit, what was your connection to come to Detroit?
Great question. I worked for Senator Virgil Smith, who at that time was the minority floor leader in Lansing in the legislature. And he let us know that he was going to be retiring and transition his career here to Detroit. And I looked at 2 cities. My daughter would say I did like a cost benefit analysis, Detroit or Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow.
And Birmingham for a lot of reasons that are easy, low low cost of living, decent schools. I probably could find a job.
Don't have to shovel snow.
Don't have to shovel snow. But you know what? Because I worked for Virgil, we called him Virgil. I spent a lot of time in Detroit, coming here for events, for different, work related activities. And the honest, I guess, moment that pushed me towards Detroit, my mother passed in 97. I was 31 years old. I knew I wanted to leave, but she had told me, when your parents give you those last items of advice, I feel you should really listen to them. And I did. My mother said, don't come this way. If you're coming this way in the state, because at that time I was living in Lansing, she said, if you're coming this way west, keep going, go to Chicago. She said, but I wish I could go to Detroit because they're building this beautiful museum. My mother liked museums, and we would travel wherever we go and across the country. We'd always go to a museum. And then when my daughter came about, we go to a children's museum. That was part of our time. She says, they're building this beautiful museum in Detroit. I won't be able to see it, but you should really think about Detroit.
Wow.
And so that kind of pushed me. Detroit. And to be totally honest, I said, well, my daughter's in the 4th grade. The next nice natural break for her to move would be at 8th grade.
Yeah.
If I don't like it, we'll move I'm going to give it some time. We'll move when she she graduates from 8th grade, but we love it.
Okay. All right. And you're talking about the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History at the time that was under construction. And just that story, if anybody knows the story and the richness of how that came about, from Dr. Wright's 2-family flat and him having the practice on one floor and the museum in another, and on the other flat, just the stories over time of bringing that to life, and also Coleman Young pushing for that to exist, and is so unique in the museum opening its doors. And upon opening its doors, it was really to lay Coleman Young to rest, how I remember it, during that time. But 97 is the year that we're looking at that groundbreaking. And at that point, not now, because the Smithsonian is, you all should check that out if you haven't been. But at that point in time, this was the largest collection of artifacts and most dynamic African-American museum in the world at that moment. And your mom was like, yo. So it's interesting that's those connections. Yeah. And I'm guessing at that point they were back down south, or they moved to Birmingham, because that was what the thought process was possibly for you too.
No, my parents were still in Benton Harbor.
Okay.
I just was looking at 2 different cities to make that move to. And Birmingham was one of those cities. And it was between Birmingham and Detroit. And I chose Detroit. And just to add one more layer to it, when I reached out to, my boss, Virgil, I said, I'm looking for a good school for my daughter. She's really smart. And he was like, well, there's Bates. He said, but there's also this school at the Science Center right next door to the Charles Wright Museum. So Alante spent 4th through 8th grade at that school that was housed inside the Science Center. She loved science. She loved math. And it was also a great way for her to meet other children who also would love math and science. And the school stayed in that building at the Science Center for about 2 years before they moved it. But to think about, again, that connectivity of how my mother's influence because of the museum and her love of museums, and that she wanted to see the Charles Wright, knowing that she would live to see it, and that her precious baby, her granddaughter Alante, went to school right next door.
That's very unique. I do remember the Science Center school. I forgot the name of it, but I remember.
Dasmat, yeah.
Dasmat. So I remember just going on field trips, and then it would be always kids there. They'd always uplift like, hey, you can go to school here. Now, that was the old Science Center with the big elevator, but
the
old school, you know what I'm talking about. Now, the new Science Center is still amazing, but it was
different.
Also something different. So Also working for Virgil Smith. Virgil Smith is clearly a legislator, family in the legislation and law, and definitely in the political family. So I'm guessing just working in that office connected you to many different people throughout the city of Detroit.
It did. I remember when I was working for Virgil, the casinos didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But the different groups and interest groups who were pitching their casino projects would come through, of course, our office. Virgil was, I would say, a mentee of Coleman Young.
Very much
so. We would always either have some type of interaction with either not Mr. Young personally, but his staff or, his family. Virgil loved him, and you could tell that was his hero. So his influence was in our office as well. Virgil brought together just an amazing group of young people. I mean, he had young, I'm talking like 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds serving as his legislative aides or chief of staff. But also where I will always be forever grateful to Virgil. At that point when I was working for him, I had my daughter. I was going to Michigan State as a non-traditional student back then. Non-traditional students it wasn't very welcoming. But I was finishing in my education, and Virgil would allow me to bring my daughter to work so that I wouldn't miss work, but also that she could be somewhere where she knew, feel safe. And she was very little at the time, but he would allow me to have the flexibility to take care of her. And I know that him creating that opportunity for me that was right when I'm really aging myself, but that's when Engler instituted Work First program. And what that did, students who had children or were on aid, it forced us to have to work, and they would use our financial aid like income, so then you wouldn't qualify for food stamps or child care assistance. It was a very draconian policy, but that was during that time. And so I couldn't have an internship where I just got credit. I needed to work. I had to work because I needed the money to pay for, help take care of my daughter. So I am, not to get in the weeds, but that was, Virgil not only gave me that opportunity, but one of my mentors, I used to see her, Faye Nelson. She would come to the office and I would watch her bag and tell her, oh, whenever you'd like, you can. I was the secretary or as the office manager. And I got to meet people by just being kind. Another example, especially since we're near Focus Hope, Eleanor Jositis would call to speak to Virgil, especially when there was legislation that was impacting Focus Hope's operations. And so years later, I'm going to jump, I came into Focus Hope to volunteer. And part of the volunteer orientation, you would have time with Eleanor. So when I said my name, she says, I know your voice. And I says, I'm sorry, we've never met. And she says, no, I don't know if you remember Eleanor Jositis. She was a real kind of person that she remembered. She says, I've met you before. And I said, well, she said, well, where did you work? I said, well, I used to work for Virgil Smith. She said, you're Lisa who answered the phone. I said, yeah, I am her. I used to answer the phone for him. So yes, it gave me an opportunity also to see the great power that people and community that of folks who look like us had. Benton Harbor is a small majority Black town, but I never got to see Black people lead at my age. Now, later after I left Benton Harbor, Blacks have become leaders and mayors and act more in power versus what I saw growing up. So I loved what I used to see when I came to Detroit. Folks in Detroit, they are making the decision. They are leading.
And it's often uplifted as many people from other cities often speak of that in Detroit. And you touched on a lot of different things. The one that I just want to shout out is definitely Eleanor Jositis. As I often say, I guess people would say like mentors. I always say big homies. And it's not a lot of people that like people always say, like, get a mentor, or I've heard that most of my life.
Huh?
It connects with some where it just goes over and beyond. And we had a deep connection. Lord knows, I have no idea how I was even selected in that group, but
Really?
one of the coolest people ever. And in that we can kind of get into a little of some of what you expressed, because during her bout with cancer, it was time that I shared with her, even like over the time, but just sitting and talking for hours and writing and processing. And this is back when I'm just rapping most days. So it's like me and her, and then she's asking me about songs, and I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? This is just an interesting relationship and connection.
Yeah.
And always have a place in my heart for her family from that.
Yeah.
But also just looking at what her healing process was really spending time really with her with the birds that she feed from the bird feeder, and pacing. But very big and instrumental. Focus Hope is in this neighborhood. Hope
Yeah.
Village Revitalization is a CDC. And along with that, just that vision. I've done like some music festivals with Focus Hope years ago.
Nice.
After meeting her, I was like, I want to do something. And very kind and very kind-hearted.
When I was working, I was a volunteer first, then I became on staff. The Bell Building was the Bell Building.
Mm-hmm.
And we would take tours of what was the vision
Mm-hmm.
for the Bell Building. And now when you drive past it, you're like, wow, her concept is now, actually helping people and doing what she intended.
So that brings to you come to Detroit and you fit into like this culture already kind of guided to. And in this, starting working, when do you transition to some leadership roles in the city of Detroit?
I would say first was a volunteer aspect. In '08, I was appointed to serve on the City Planning Commission. And in '08, that was before LCA. It didn't even exist. We still had, phases of different projects around the city. It gave me an opportunity to be in a space where not only, at the City Planning Commission is where developers come and they're trying to get their project so it can make it to council. So we're the community's voice and vetting space. And that taught me a lot about how deals get done, how deals get done.
Yeah.
How the deal got done.
Yeah.
And also how important it is that community comes to those meetings and voices either their approval of the project or their disapproval of the project, and why. That was in '08. And then in 2010, I will say it was the job that gave me the most joy thus so far in my working career. I was at AARP. They identified in all the urban cities, LA, Chicago, Detroit, Orlando, Miami, New York, Houston, NOLA, New Orleans, and a couple cities in California, where they created these jobs called multicultural leadership directors. But I want to just tell you how I got to AARP was through the connection I made with Virgil, because I worked with a talented young woman named Felicia Watson, who was one of Virgil's, she was his legislative aide and then became his chief of staff. And she was at AARP and she sent me an email
Hmm.
about a new job that AARP was creating in all these urban cities to begin to really go deep in community. And she said, you should apply. And I'll never forget, my interview was on my birthday.
Hmm.
And they said, oh, you're taking this interview on your birthday? I said, what better day than to give myself a new opportunity where I get to really do some work to help not only older adults in community, but also my community. Because I'm a proud Benton Harbor girl. Everybody knows I always holler West Side, the real West Side.
Hilarious.
But I've been in Detroit now over 25 years, so I think I have a native Detroiter card now. But I appreciate both spaces and the role each of them has in my life and my daughter's life, obviously. So I'm at AARP, and they said multicultural leadership. And I said, well, in Detroit, of course, I got to go deep in the African American community. I said, but you can't do if you really want to do real multicultural work, you got to do work in the Latino community, in the Asian community, the Arab American community, our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. We just can't be in one slice because to me, the way I approached the work was that Detroit truly is a diverse, like, quilt. You know, my grandma was a quilter. She was born in 1896. So I remember all the little pieces and how they would cut. You look at them like, oh, that's not going to look right. But by the end of when grandma would finish that quilt, it would be beautiful. But it was all of those unique pieces, colorful pieces, different textured pieces came together to make a beautiful quilt. And that's how I approached multiculturalism. And I for example, AARP didn't have Arab American languaged material. Now, you know, everybody got a bunch of, it's not an advertisement for AARP, but they have tons of literature, but it let you know that at that time they were willing to lean and be open to what I was bringing to this table. And that's how we live. I mean, we live in a multicultural community. Now, do they always connect the way we want them to? No. But I said aging is the common thread that anybody, regardless of their background or their ethnic identity, if they continue to live, they're going to age. They're going to age through the lens of their culture and how they, identify.
So you, once again, a lot of richness that you provided in that, like even starting with, it's like, okay, planning commission, which we could dive deep into that alone, but I really want to start here with that role. Because at that time, in that snapshot, as many people are speaking about a lot of what's happening now when it comes to DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yep.
And the functionality of it. What purpose does it serve? I've even spoken to the at times a lot of corporations, I feel like, even as I was seeing it, they were window dressing because I didn't really see the functionality of what that does to their operations. It looks good.
Yeah.
But does it really connect to their mission?
Right.
You are in a space where it really does need to connect to their mission because of who AARP serves. And now we can really get into, like, let's forget that term as much as let's talk about culture itself.
Right.
And why is it so important to get people that understand culture?
Well, if you really want to serve me or support me, you need to understand my culture, because my culture, in my opinion, is part of it is my identity. It's not the sole piece of my identity, but it's the grounding, it's the rooting of my identity. Also, if you to touch on when you said the window dressing, to me, that's kind of when companies take a paternalistic approach. I know what you need. I'm going to give you this. You should be happy. No, if you really are doing real inclusion work, really true multicultural understanding work, I'm going to listen to you telling me what you need. I'm going to listen and see where are the similarities, where are the clash points, but also how do we work through those places where we may not be aligned. But I want to listen. I want to include you and let you lead and provide support to the solution, not solve it for you or give, because sometimes I think that's insulting for me to say, well, I see this or I see that in your community, but that's from my eyes. And also too, that's insulting. I want to listen and you tell me what you need. And then how can we work together on the things that are aligned with our mission and your mission, and everybody wins.
And with that, this is like another one of them notes. I'm about to go on one of them Kari rants.
Come on, Kari.
This is why I agree with you, and it's so important. And as I move into more positions of leadership, culture even plays out in organizations.
Yeah.
And we often hear this, and it's true. It's some extremely skilled and very talented people that just don't fit within the culture of an organization. And it's people that are not as talented, not as skilled, but they manifest and they function so well within the culture, right? So we've all felt that. Everybody watching this has felt that. Now let's look at that in the macro lens. America itself is a culture that I always say it's designed for white men, and not just white men, it's designed for white men with businesses and property. So that's the culture that I think America functions best in. I've been saying this on podcasts for a long time. Like, if your car runs out of antifreeze, can you put some water in it and kind of get going? Yes. But it's best run on antifreeze or Dex Cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's functioning. But as we can look at it as a salad or a melting pot or whatever, but the reality is that white men with businesses and properties no longer hold that same positionality in what functions as we look at America. And that's why I think we have so many stripes right now, because it's so layered. Hence, That's where like the culture even matters more, and the small nuances of it even matter more. So, like, classic example in the city of Detroit, in just jokes that people may make or something. It's like, I know you just by the way you play spades. Now, technically, should a person judge a person's character and the way they make decisions based on playing a couple of games of spades with them? If you're not from our community, you would think you crazy as hell.
Or they might say, I don't even pay spades, I pay bid.
Yes. And they say that, right?
Right.
But if you play,
right,
then it's like, I already know kind of where you put you. Okay, you jumping out here. I get you. Where it doesn't, it's like you gotta be in the mix of it. But when we've been immersed in a culture where we've already kind of have had the dual consciousness, Richard Wright speaks about this and wrote about it like eloquently. That dual consciousness of we have to know what game we're in, usually to function, especially if we're in arcs dealing with institutions, because institutions themselves have it. Every entity has it. Our internal family has a culture, and things can get more aligned. And that's why I do think it just doesn't connect if you don't have a person that's really willing to, like you say, listen, because you're listening for the nuance.
Right.
Communities like mine, where something as simple as voter apathy is beyond high, right? And then people will say to themselves, like, how can you not vote? But then you look at my community and you say to yourself, what's the messaging even reaching out? So you can say the chicken or the egg. It's already looked at like they don't vote. So is it worth putting resources in there? And then on the other side, you look at it and say, but if you put the resources in there, they may get out and vote. All of these variables. And then it's like, okay, if you put the resources in there and they may get out and vote, then comes the bigger question. What could you really do that would make that person really want to vote where they can say, okay, it could be measured? And these aren't necessarily the easiest answers either, you know?
Right.
So like when you really getting into that community and aging becomes something so different, because aging, as I've been a caretaker, and for anybody that's been in the caretaking journey, shout out to you.
Yeah.
Because that's really where it's gonna, as you say, what I know, what I stick to. I mean, it could be something just as simple as the greatest food that you need to eat because it's healthier for you. You really need to eat it. I mean, everybody that's caretaking is having this discussion possibly, I don't know, every day, 2 times a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, you need to eat this alkaline,
Yeah.
sweet potato, quinoa-based stir fry. But if you come from, as we know, through these Detroiters difference, Georgia, Alabama, and you've been eating that soul food your whole life, that's where culturally now we need to know a Erica and a Detroit Vegan Soul to step in. And that's where you, somebody that knows the culture, can like, okay, we can walk it over through this. Because putting a plate of quinoa on grandpa's
Right. Right. You have just, you said, what you just shared was just so rich. And it was flooding my mind with memories of programs that I created when I was at AARP. Like I created this caregiving series. And one of the sessions I had Callie she used to have
Callilicious.
Yeah, she had a juice. And I wanted her to introduce older adults to it, but also caregivers. Because they need to, that's an easy, quick way for them to get something nutritious because you're busy with caregiving. And also you can share it with the person that you're caregiving for. And it's both of you can benefit from it. I had Lizette come in. She's a exercise expert to provide teaching caregivers how to do quick exercises. But the point is that series was to address a need, but taking in consideration of what you just said, the culture. What are vegan or more healthier opportunities, but also the baseline of it is access. And I believe that I've learned the last 18 months of my life, I went from being I'm still an aging professional, but someone who had caregiving for my dad until he passed at 19. And then I learned a lot from being at AARP and also an actual caregiver for my father, putting that stuff into practice for myself.
And that's where I Wright was about to make the switch, is you did it for me.
Oh.
Because from that position and seeing what caregiving and those steps and hearing so much, your experience, as I said, it's impacted all of our families. It's to the point where I think that now we're looking as Americans as the probability of dealing with cancer, because that's what I'm speaking about.
Yeah.
It's exponentially high.
Oh yeah.
And it can be tough, at least just from the outside in, from family and seeing that. But you dealing with it.
Yeah, I want one thing. If anyone doesn't learn anything from our conversation today, the importance of growing your voice. I thought I had a voice because you saw my voice in community, but I had to learn how to be even more ardent advocate for myself. Health disparities are really real. I think a lot of people of color, especially Black women, we're dying at higher rates from just having a baby. We also are dying at higher rates from all types of cancer, especially breast cancer, but all types of cancer. And I believe it's because of what I endured going through trying to find out what was even wrong with it. When I presented to the to the emergency room in August, summer of 23, I said to the ER doc, I'm in pain. It hurts to breathe. I can't lay flat, and I don't want pain meds. I'm not in here because I want pain meds. That I felt I needed to say that is because I knew I was inside of a system that didn't acknowledge the excruciating pain I was in. They couldn't seem to figure out until finally she says, I believe you. I says, please don't send me home. I'm in a lot of pain. I had 3 pulmonary embolisms in my lower part of my lung.
Wow.
If she'd have sent me home, I probably would have died or would have had a stroke. And because, my daughter lives out of town, so I live by myself, I could have died. I mean, that's not being dramatic. I really could have, but that I had to advocate. Even in that moment, I says, I want you to know I'm not trying to get pain meds. Something is wrong with me. And I appreciate that she paused and she listened to me. But think about it. I had to say that. I didn't have to think it. I had to say that. And then we fast forward between August until December. I'm going to all these different doctors. And finally, one doctor, they say, well, maybe we'll never know why you threw the 3 blood clots, why your blood, maybe we just may never know. And that is true. There are a lot of people who just are prone to blood clots. But I went to my OBGYN. I love it. Shout out to Dion Dickerson. Physicians for Women on Northwestern Highway in Southfield. She says, Lisa, you're healthy. You don't smoke. You don't drink. I'm going to just run some tests. My health insurance wouldn't allow me to have the tests. She fought for me to get a CT test that they never let me have that test. So she said, okay. And think about it. She running her practice, but she's taking time to have conversations with the medical director of my insurance company at the time. I didn't know doctors could do all that. I've learned a lot, more than I wanted to know. But then she says, I'm going to have you have a mammogram, a 3D mammogram. I said, well, I'm up to date on my mammograms. And I go to Carmanos every year. She says, no, I want you to get a 3D mammogram. There was the tumor sitting there in my chest on the same side of my body where the 3 blood clots were. And so I found out that I had cancer for a while, because in order for my blood to begin to thicken, that means that the cancer had been there for a while. And my body, the way God made us, our bodies try to fight foreign things. So when your blood thickens, and they were like, you've probably been sick for a while. And your tumor was too small, and we didn't give you a 3D mammogram. And the only way we would have seen it was it needed that 3D mammogram. So I tell all women at all ages, especially women of color, because we have dense breasts, get a 3D mammogram. It saved my life. And why it saved my life? Because I had a fast-growing cancer. The oncologist told my daughter, your mom was up to date. If she had waited for another year to come in here, I'd be having a different kind of conversation.
Wow. So with what you just laid out, thank you so much for sharing this information as you open up. And I want to connect a lot of different things here of what you just shared.
Sure.
Classic. Detroit is different. We got to go there. First, as I uplift, when you talk about Black women not being heard in hospitals, it even goes to, as far as I'm concerned, arguably the greatest athlete we've ever seen in Serena Williams not being listened to in a hospital.
Yeah.
So this is the greatest athlete, and she's not heard. And she's married to like a multi-millionaire
Right.
Black woman, And this also goes into an interview in the archives of Detroit is Different that I did with Dr. Lovejoy. Dr. Lovejoy, a professor at U of M that spent all this time working, and he finally, towards retirement, said, I want to do a project that's more impactful. And these Black women that were also professors up there, and they were studying exactly what you were saying. People not listening to Black people, but specifically Black women in medical situations. And he since is just gathering all this data about this. And Dr. Lovejoy will come back, and then I gave him my copy of Medical Apartheid. And for this, and this is also where you just go into like just different arcs of like, where is academia at on these topics? Because I'm like, you're studying all of this. The two professors are studying all of this, and they're not giving you a copy of Medical Apartheid. And when I say that Medical Apartheid, just as a Black person, maybe like it's a lot of stuff in history you will read that'll make you angry. You got to prepare yourself for that. That's like one of those like, because you have these systems that go. And then within this, just from the outside in, I remember when my mom passed, this is something else that like almost all medical conditions, when it trends with Black women, are very high. My mom passed of a brain aneurysm in 2017. And that's another one of those things where they say that Black women are just higher than most. And it's always freak. It's always, you go to the hospital, they don't know what's going on. Then, they keep running tests. And then they run those tests, and then the expert that's supposed to be there is on vacation, and they're coming in next week, and then they'll send you to this doctor and then that doctor, and then you're shifting between systems. Not to mention like during these times, just the trauma of it all. And then this is the other big block in the thought process is, do we have the money for this? Which is another key element in a lot of this Black people not being heard. It's, can they afford it? Which that's a Kari perspective, also in Medical Apartheid uplifted a little bit. But at the root of it, this is where the business and medicine becomes so much more scary. And even a lot of my takes on what happened with the COVID-19 crisis. Because I just, in my lifetime, I'm 42 now. When I was a child, I always say, and I'm in marketing and advertisement, so I pay attention to stuff. But when I was a kid, we would always see car commercials on TV because that was the largest industry in America at the time.
I think I know where you're going.
The largest industry in America right now is what you see the most commercials for is hospitals and pharmaceuticals. And it's one of those things that you just hate to mention, but it's just the truth because it's a stark reality where it's like, if I'm in the business of making money, and I got a hospital and I got drugs, then I need you to be using them. So the profit in sickness, especially in communities like ours, is exponential till it becomes overwhelming.
Right.
Hence, like advocating for yourself through and navigating those spaces, what those scans are. Do you have the right doctor? The overload of probably who your primary care physician is. As I say, Black women are present there. Black men just aren't even in looking at hospitals because of, and it's weird. Just as Black folks, we have to question why a Black person doesn't trust any institution in America is, you have a valid argument.
Oh, yeah.
The tough thing about it, especially when it comes to medicine, is it's still needed and to stay up upon it. Even when I tell my homeboys and with my PCP and what that connection is, and if you can even have time to really sit and talk between the loads of where these people have. So I know that's a long context, but I want to get at context so that people kind of can understand that advocating for yourself in a medical situation is like advocating for yourself. You got to almost look at going in the hospital like you taking the stand by yourself, as your own attorney, kind of.
Yeah.
But we sometimes blindly just think to ourselves, we're going to walk in the doors, they're going to take care of everything, and we can stop thinking.
And I think as women, we sometimes aren't as eager to push back. Or like I did with her, with the ER doc, just I just was, because I was in so much discomfort. I said, look here, don't send me home with just pain medicine. Something is wrong with, I had to be kind of aggressive. And I pride myself in being a nice lady, but as I shared with you earlier before we started the interview, this experience taught me how to really speak up for myself. I learned a lot of the muscle around how to navigate hospitals in my caregiving journey with my dad, and then all of the deep caregiving expertise I gained from, working for AARP, but to apply it to myself and then add on that lens, I'm a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned that when you are in this experience, and because I was alone a lot of times because my daughter lives out of town, not as a negative, I wanted her to grow her wings and fly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? She didn't get 2 PhDs from Carnegie Mellon to sit here up under me. I want her to go and be and live her life and enjoy. She had just gotten married. I felt so bad. I mean, my daughter and my new son-in-law had only been married 8 days. I know he was like, whoa, what's going on here? But right. But I started taking pictures. I started videotaping folks. And I would ask the doctor, can I videotape this? Can I record this? Because I want my daughter to hear it from you, not synthesize it through my, voice. I want you to hear it. So I began taking pictures, taking video, just as a form of a record in case something happened to me, somebody would be able to know what happened. And through the course of my journey, my daughter would come for all of my, for my chemo treatments, for all of my doctor's appointments, or I'd have her beam in, through Zoom or through the phone. And we realized on my last day of treatment, one of her dear friends, Christian, who is WY6 Productions, he's a local filmmaker here in Detroit. He went to King, Lante went to Cass. They were friends since 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, how's Miss Lisa? She said, she's doing okay. Her mind is good, She says, but on the 9th, she's going to ring the bell. He said, he had just finished film school. He says, can I follow her?
Wow.
And she said, yeah, my mom's a ham. She'll love it. So Chris followed me from the moment I woke up that day on the 9th until I rang the bell. And then later that day, my daughter surprised me with a Oprah and Gail on the couch conversation.
Wow.
And he recorded that. And so at the end of it, he said, he was looking at the feedback guys with all these fancy cameras and stuff. He said, this is really good. And he says, this is real good. And Lante says, Chris, she got over about 1,000 or more photos. She's been documenting since the day she had the pulmonary embolism. So I even have a bowl of all my wristbands.
Wow.
Since August of 23. I mean, it's a big bowl. And as I come home, I throw it. But that's the way I kind of document things. And so he said, let's look at it. And she says, and she looked at what he had. And the two of them said, we got a documentary.
That's deep.
And to be honest with you, Kari, I was like, I didn't take these for public consumption. There are times, there are videos where at 3 a.m, the pain woke me up, or the sickness from the chemo or whatever woke me up, and I would get my phone and talk into my phone, just to talk myself, just to talk to myself what it was going through. And for example, there were things that would happen in the treatment process that they wouldn't warn you about or tell you about. For example, we highlighted in the film when I had to have, right before my surgery, like an hour before my surgery, they said, we got to put this probe in. I was like, what kind of probe? And I took a I was so frightened. I videotaped and took a picture where I have this wire sticking out of my body. The wire is about that high, and this is all this little wire, and the end of the wire goes to where the tumor is.
Mm.
I wasn't asleep, obviously. I was deadened a little bit, but that I felt someone should have told me. Maybe I'm scary, I don't know. But someone should have told me that this was going to happen. And not to jump around, but we had women who had been through cancer who were part of the audience that saw the rough cut. And they said, nobody told me either that was going to happen to me.
Yep.
Nobody told me. And they were brought to tears saying, thank you for doing it. Maybe somebody will see this before their journey and see this is going to happen to you.
And with that, that's the tough thing about those medical procedures, because you're in, we use that same word, you're in the culture of the hospital, and they're moving around. This nurse comes to you, that nurse, oh, we got to prepare. You know what I'm saying? We're about to put this in you. And you'd be like, what is this that you about to put in me? And back to like having the courage to speak up. And you're from leadership. You're in different spaces. So you've traveled speaking, but speaking up when you frame things, this goes right back into that same world of culture, even though it's all for you, but it's built to make you feel as though you don't know anything. And you have to trust these experts in this process, and they're all working on your body. Then you put the icing on the cake of, like you say, as a Black woman, it's already the stereotype of this angry Black defiant woman, which goes also into like a lot of these studies that have been done on a lot of the doctors, definitely just not connecting. A lot of the doctors aren't connecting to understanding that Black cultural experience, and they have the kind of understanding that, since I would say back to a lot of our horrific journey here in America, that Black women can tolerate more pain.
Yeah, their cultural competence is not where it needs to be.
And all of that plays into everything that you're saying, as it gets overwhelming.
Yeah. And so I'm hoping that through the documentary, that some of that overwhelm, I hate that another woman has to go through breast cancer. My wish is that they could find a cure, and a woman or man, because men get breast cancer as well.
Yes.
Wouldn't have to go through it. But then it goes back to our earlier point. Is this part of that economic machine of pharmaceuticals and medicine? I don't have an answer for that, but I know from what I've experienced, I'm hoping that it will give. Everybody's cancer experience is unique, but there are some baseline things that happen that I hope our documentary takes the mystique away, enlightens, educates, empowers, lets women, men, whomever know you can push back, you can speak up. If you feel that you are not being diagnosed correctly or not being heard, fine, keep moving to a doctor. Don't just say, well, this doctor said he didn't think nothing was wrong with me, or she didn't think anything was wrong with me. But something, I believe, either Mother Wit, Holy Spirit, your whoever you call it, if something inside you is saying something is wrong and you need to check into it, I think we need to learn to exercise that muscle, to push back, to speak up. I get emotional when I think about it.
Yeah. No, it's I completely understand, and it's such a blessing that you have the courage to share this with us, because this is gonna be such an instrumental tool for the next person, as we say, we don't want anyone to experience this, but to know, because the way that I would say it's almost similar to war. Like right now, we watch war play out on the in the chambers of Congress, but what's happening is completely different. And especially if it's medical, it's your life. But the pageantry of everything set up, it's all these machines, they're running things around you. This person, that person. This is the expert. That's the doctor from here. They're gonna join us for this. And it's like, hold on, what's going on? How is this happening? Why is this happening? And then you say that, and then it's like, oh, it's even that's back to the subtleties in culture. It's like, oh, here we go. You feel that energy where it's like, oh, should I just be cool? Even though in your heart it's like, nah, this ain't cool. I remember back to not personalizing it too much, but it's in that same experience of when, even in my mom's passing, of the I'll remember this to the day I pass. It was, and it's surreal because as these things are happening, it's such a vulnerable space of you just processing what's happening. But but the brain aneurysm comes, and we waiting on all these experts and stuff, and then they're basically like, well, the term in which we can care here at the hospital has passed on, and if we can your mother or my dad, his wife, if you have the preparation and everything where you can take her, you can take her. Where it's like, okay, I mean, in reality, you might as well have said, pull the plug. Because I mean, it's like, you think that we just sitting around as, as Detroit entrepreneurs, and we have a $500,000 facility with a full staff ready to assume something like this. So it's like, what are we saying? And then all of the focus for like, okay, was she a donor? Was she not a donor? Do you want to be a donor? And it's like, it's just an interesting arc of how that is. And this is really where, like, back to 360, and I'm going to keep bringing this up. If people were more understanding of how to connect to us and how to speak to us, which this is where the culture matters, then you would know where, somebody going to come in here and make it plain. Look, it's going to be a lot of stuff you don't want to go through. It's going to happen, this going to happen, that's going to happen. Now, you don't want to hear it, but I'm just telling you, this is this process. And then now we can have a real conversation, but that's not usually how that happens in that system.
I'm hoping that through my documentary and other organizations locally and nationally that are working to advance how doctors engage with Black women.
Yeah.
We need to find ways to normalize. I may not know it all. Let me pause and listen to the patient. Also, too, something that I think is really important, and I talk about it in my documentary, we as Black women, as we feel comfortable, we need to be a part of clinical trials, clinical studies, because the medicines and the methodologies that they're building them around the people who participate in the studies.
Culture.
And in order for our data and the way we react to treatments and the way we react to things, I think it's important for it to be brought to bear. So, for example, I was a part of, when I started my chemo, they asked me, before I started my chemo to be exact, was I open to being a part of one of the studies at Wayne State University and School of Medicine. And based on the type of cancer that I had, I wasn't a part of a study where I took medicine, but what they were doing, they tracked from dose 1 to the last dose, and I gave them qualitative responses on how it affected me. And I think it's important because that means this random, because your name is not attached to it, but my information as a Black woman at the age of 57 and how the medicine affected me from I think that's important for them to know and for it to bear, because if all of the studies are based around women who are Caucasian or from another country,
Mm-hmm.
that's not me here on the southeast side of the state.
Yeah.
And I know we have a lot of reason to be hesitant to do it because of, can you say Tuskegee studies? Can you say Mrs. Lax? Do I need to continue?
Mm-hmm.
Those are good, solid reasons why we should be hesitant, but also in the same breath, because of what happened to them.
Yeah.
Let us do something now to make sure that good information that we are approving and giving permission to be shared can be used to how they build out. For example, I was in a neuropathy study, how chemotherapy damages your nerves. I thank the Lord, but I didn't have neuropathy in my hands.
Mm.
The medicine that I had to take causes neuropathy, and neuropathy is the damage of the nerves in your fine, extremities.
Mm.
But I had it only affected my left foot.
Mm.
So they could, that's good information for them to know.
Yeah.
And not to, bear my hope, but in essence, I have bared my chest and bared my life. But I said, it's done from a vein of, I want to help my people. I want to help people. But what I said first, I want to help my people.
That's beautiful. And I want to add one more point, and then I want to let people know, how do they connect, how do they support, how do they see it. But one more key point in this is also in the field of medicine. So connecting is similar to, I love analogies, as you can see, but it's like, we don't support the criminal justice system, but Lord knows if you ever stand trial, you definitely want to see a jury that's really of your peers.
Right.
So it's similar. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's when you like, I wish we was on that jury. So it's similar in that, and also in that same representation of it. My doctor, my PCP, Dr. Paul. That's me. Dr. Paul is a white guy that started with the primary care, Plum Health, and I've been with them for a long time. But someone reached out to me and was like, "Yo, I'm looking for a black PCP. That's a man." And I'm like, it's so tough to sometimes find a lot of black physicians that are in PCP levels, because oftentimes a lot of the black doctors, when they're going through medical school, they're encouraged to say, hey, these are the more boutique fields where you can make more money, and things like that. If you can get more specialized in things, which is great that we're in some of those specialty markets. But the mindset of knowing also, 360 again, Dr. Charles Wright was a family physician, and that's how he had relationship with community. It's definitely not going to be as glamorous as being a plastic surgeon, which I think is the space that many, if you're excelling through medical school because of the money, you're going to be in that space. And plastic surgery is a lot of things that do help community too. You know what I'm saying? It's not just the Kardashian family, but those are things that I do want to uplift when we think about some of the structure of what exists, when we think of how do we engage our community more in these systems where we can understand one another, because that's what's blocking. The cultures aren't connecting. How do people connect? Because this seems to be very down home, direct, and we're going to understand and we'll get it a lot more. How do people connect?
Sure. We have the whitmoreproject.com as our website. We have on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and we just premiered our YouTube. That's where our new updated trailer resides there. We also have a profile on filmfreeway.com. We have submitted to 6 local and national film festivals. We've submitted to the Free Press Film Festival and the Black Detroit Black Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hoping, we got our fingers crossed that, we get selected for documentary short. We also are seen as a social impact film category.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Black women's health issues, women's health. But we hope to have in October somewhere. I want to have a community screening. And once we solidify that, I'll definitely let you and your listeners know in October, because October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But you need to be aware of breast cancer and cancer
24/7.
24/7, every day of the week. And how you can do that, pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Pay attention to what you take into your body, what you eat. Don't be afraid to question the doctors around different side effects. I do feel, I have no medical background, but I feel the reason that so many people have been stricken with cancers because I think it's environmental. I think it's environmental. And so we have to find ways. There's, of course, we eat bad, bad in, bad out. But I do think, that's where I think the environmental justice, Lisa, is starting to emerge, because I really feel that a lot of the folks, especially where you look and where you live, like I'll use Benton Harbor, for example. Benton Harbor, Kari alluded to it, one of our big industries in that area is farming and agriculture. And back in the day, they were spraying that place.
Yeah.
Because of all the fruit trees. I mean, we have blossom time. That's a celebration of the blossoms, because that means the harvest is going to come. Welch's and all the different big agribusiness companies have locations there.
Yep.
And it always made me wonder, back when my mother died.
Yeah.
She didn't smoke. She didn't drink. My mother didn't even allow cards in the house. She didn't allow that. I mean, she was very clean, okay? And for her to have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, blood cancer, and I feel so many of her friends have had bouts of cancer who all live in that southwestern Michigan area and are exposed to that intense kind of that agribusiness where they're spraying all those chemicals and all those fertilizers.
Because that's back to, like we say, these institutions and these industries. And we definitely know farming and our people definitely have, when you talk about an industry that ain't sanctimonious, I mean, just look at the way the USDA treats black farmers. But yeah, I mean, the pesticides, or even nowadays, obviously, most of these crops are annual crops. So an annual crop, so people can kind of get the concept, meaning that if you plant the seed this year, you'll have to plant the seed next year, meaning that they have been genetically engineered to be like that. So God knows what that is, because I want to get some more seed business in. This is going back to like business impacting people.
Right.
And I don't know what that's doing to people, but it's probably some of those things that are piecing together of like, let God's work be God's work.
Right. We have to move. You got to do, I reluctantly, but I'm doing it because they say to decrease the chance of reoccurrence of my cancer coming back, I have to exercise. So I exercise now. I'm lifting weights. So if you go on my Instagram, on the Whitmore Project Instagram, you see me. I'm bench pressing now.
Okay.
Trying to be healthier. But also, again, this work, as you could from our conversation today, we backed into creating this document. We hope, but we're intentional in hoping that people learn something, learn to listen more to themselves, learn to speak up and advocate, and not be afraid to push back, even to doctors that they trust, the doctors that they know or they don't know, and that you have to use your voice in that way, and that it isn't selfish to care for yourself.
I love it. So we close with classic Detroit is Different questions.
Okay.
Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
Oh, Lord, an AMC Spirit.
An AMC?
An AMC Spirit. It was white. It was white with the hatchback. That was, let me see. My dad bought it for me when I was a sophomore at Michigan State, so that would have been 85.
Okay. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Knowing me, probably around campus to a party with my girlfriends.
Okay. All right. On campus, Michigan State.
Mhm.
I love it. Love it. Andre Rison may have been at that part. I'm just
He came as I was leaving.
yeah, I know.
That's
All right.
funny.
So,
Thank you.
with that being said, second question.
Okay.
You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks.
Mhm.
Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
Oh. I just left church. We're going to play Blow the Whistle,
Okay.
and then we're going to play something by Mary Mary.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And the last one,
Uh-huh.
you've been here for a grip, but you still get the out of towner question because I
Okay.
want to hear what you're going to say.
All right.
Because you see it from a different lens.
Yeah.
Spaceship comes down. E.T. crumbs out. Walks right up to you and is like, take me to the most Detroit place you could take me. Where you and E.T. hanging out at?
Oh, man. We're going to go to Aretha or Shane Park. Some people I call
Okay.
Aretha. We're going to go to Belle Isle.
Okay.
We're going to go to different Coney Islands now. I know. I still like American. I ain't never had no problem there, but we're going to go to a Coney Island.
Okay.
Where else we going to go? We're going to go to L. George's on 6 Mile.
Okay, I'm with it. I think it will be that will be a very Instagrammable moment. You'll end up with a photo. You, E.T.
E.T. ate here.
And some grilled chicken pitas.
Oh, he'll be like, this is good.
I know. It's like he gonna be coming back.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing to give common folks voice and a space to share their voice.
Oh, it's as you see, I'm jaw japping as much. I love this because it gets to touch on different stuff.
You can tell.
With that, peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.